the hidden thrones within, unlocking the Omega forces that govern both light and darkness. There's a level of spiritual power that doesn't just shift atmospheres, it bends the grid of reality itself. It's not just about healing, not just about protection, not even just about purpose. I'm talking about Omega power, the finaltier, the end code embedded into the soul of those who were never meant to fit into ordinary existence. These are not gifts you learn. These are forces you unveil. You don't ask for them, they awaken when you're ready to carry the weight of eternity inside your bones. And when they're active in you, even archangels pause, even demons tremble, because they know this is not someone who plays with light, this is someone who commands it. The first Omega power is the power of divine stillness. It sounds simple, but it's one of the rarest states a human being can achieve. Not silence, stillness. A frequency where your internal world is so aligned, so deeply anchored in the eternal, that even the chaos of hell cannot provoke you. It is the power that terrifies demons the most, because they thrive in reaction. But when you dwell in stillness, you become untouchable, unrattled. You shift from being a battlefield to becoming a throne. When was the last time you sat with the storm and didn't flinch? When you stopped trying to control the noise and became the eye of it, that's Omega. That's when you stop fighting darkness and start commanding it to submit. The second Omega power is the power of uncorrupted vision. This is the ability to see the truth, not just in people, but in systems, seasons, atmospheres, and even timelines. It's what prophets carried when they warned kings. It's what sages carried when they spoke in riddles that shaped empires. But the catch? You only receive this power when your ego has died. Because if your eyes are still trying to feed your pride, the vision will be blurred. When you carry uncorrupted vision, you see through beauty and through deception. You see the intention behind the action. And both angels and demons respect it because you're not reacting to the illusion. You're moving based on the origin. That level of sight is terrifying to darkness. It means they can't hide anymore. The third Omega power is the power of radical obedience. Not partio, not convenient, not filtered through logic or comfort. I'm talking about the kind of obedience where you walk away from everything you built because God whispered one word. The kind that makes no sense to man but unlocks realms in the spirit. Obedience at this level looks like madness to the untrained eye. But in the unseen realm, it's nuclear. It's the kind of power that splits seas, shuts lions' mouths, and causes time to bend around your assignment. Demons don't fear your songs. They don't fear your sermons. They fear your yes. Because when you obey without argument, you activate a force that cannot be replicated by talent. It's not about being used. It's about being available. And that level of surrender? It scares hell more than any weapon. The fourth Omega power is the power of sacred memory. This one is overlooked, but it's the key to dominion. It's the ability to remember who you are, even in the midst of spiritual amnesia. When life hits you, when the spiritual fog rolls in, when the voices of fear and doubt try to drown you, do you remember? Do you remember what God told you in the fire? Do you remember the promises branded into your spirit before you were ever born? Sacred memory isn't about nostalgia. It's about anchoring your identity in eternity. When you operate from sacred memory, you don't negotiate with darkness. You announce your origin. You don't beg for breakthrough. You command it because you remember whose image you carry. And when the enemy sees you walking in that kind of remembrance, he knows he's lost the battle before it began. The fifth Omega power is the power of hidden fire. Not the fire that explodes on stages, not the fire that impresses crowds. I'm talking about the fire that burns in secret. The fire that sustains you when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one understands. This is the fire that you protect like a holy ember. You feed it with prayer, with solitude, with obedience, with tears. And over time it becomes a furnace, not for show but for shaping. That's when you stop needing external fire to stay lit. You walk into old places and set them ablaze because of what you've been cultivating in secret. That's what makes darkness nervous. Not your volume, but your temperature. Hidden fire means you don't burn out, you burn through. The sixth Omega power is the power of timeless faith. This is not belief. This is not hope. This is a posture that exists outside of time. You pray not for the miracle, you pray from it. You speak not from the present, but from the eternal. This kind of faith doesn't just believe God can, it knows God already did. Timeless faith doesn't wait for signs, it creates them. It bends probability. It laughs at delay. It walks into the tomb and speaks to bones like they're just sleeping. And the reason even angels respect this power is because it mirrors the Creator. It echoes the original voice that said, "Let there be." Timeless faith is not reactive, it is creative. And when you walk in it, even the laws of nature begin to submit to your alignment. And finally, the seventh Omega power is the power of eternal presence. This is the rarest of them all. It is when your being becomes so saturated with God's essence that every room you enter begins to shift. You don't preach, you radiate. You don't instruct, you transform. This is when your presence becomes a portal, not because of gifting, but because of oneness. You've become so empty of self that only God remains. And in that state, your touch heals, your silence convicts, your breath carries peace. Demons flee not because you rebuke them, but because your very existence exposes their instability. You're not just reflecting light, you've become one with it. And even archangels stand back in reverence when a human reaches that level, because it means the impossible has happened. The finite has merged with the infinite. So now I ask you, not as entertainment, not as a teacher, but as a fellow traveler on this path of fire and glory, which of these powers have you been unknowingly carrying, buried under years of fear, shame, or distraction? And more importantly, are you ready to stop living like a visitor in your own soul and start ruling like the Omega being you were always designed to become? Because these powers don't come from effort. They come from remembering. And once you remember who you are, nothing, not angels, not demons, not death itself, can stop you. The throne within the storm, how to train, temper, and wield the Omega powers without destroying yourself. When these powers awaken in you, it's not a spiritual glow-up. It's not a reward for being good. It's a summons, a call to govern realms your ego is too small to manage. That's why the first step is not to use them, it's to survive them. Because untempered Omega power is like holding lightning in bare hands. It can burn you up from the inside out if your inner world isn't structured to host it. This is where many fall. They receive the revelation, the fire, the supernatural insight, but their foundation is still cracked by insecurity, unhealed trauma, pride, or addiction to approval. You cannot pour eternal energy into a leaking vessel. And so the real training begins not with power, but with purification. The deeper truth is that power without presence becomes performance, and performance becomes poison. So the first training ground for Omega power is solitude, not loneliness, solitude. It's in the wilderness that the flesh dies, in the silence that the false self unravels, in the isolation that your soul becomes a throne instead of a mirror. And hear me, the wilderness is not a punishment, it's a forge, a sacred place where God removes everything that would corrupt the power He's about to entrust to you. If you've been hidden, misunderstood, or forgotten, it's not exile, it's engineering. You're being hollowed out so He can fill you without resistance. Once solitude has done its work, the second training is in obedience without outcome. This is where your motives are tested. When you obey even when nothing seems to change. When you give without getting. When you speak truth that costs you everything. This is the training that separates those who want power from those who can carry it. You learn to move not because of results, but because of resonance. You act when the spirit moves, not when the crowd claps. And in that obedience, something miraculous begins to happen. Your spirit becomes sharp, discernment increases, timing improves. You start to feel divine patterns before they manifest. You're no longer reacting to life, you're orchestrating it from alignment. The next stage, perhaps the most painful, is the training in invisibility. You must learn to be invisible in a world addicted to attention. You must let your ego die every time you're overlooked, misunderstood, or uncelebrated. This is where God hides his greatest warriors, not behind platforms, but behind purpose. You'll be doing things that shift the atmosphere of cities, and no one will know your name. And that's the point, because if you still need credit, you're not ready for the crown. The Omega realm isn't about being seen, it's about being sent. Invisibility is not obscurity, it's stealth. You are moving through dimensions unseen, accomplishing divine missions with zero applause. Can you keep showing up when no one notices? Can you still burn when no one claps? By this time, the Omega power is beginning to take root. Your authority is growing, your alignment is sharpening, and your presence is starting to carry weight. But now comes the most dangerous trial, temptation disguised as promotion. You'll start getting offers, openings, attention, influence. But not all opportunities are divine. Some are designed to detach you from your origin. You'll be tempted to dilute your message for mass appeal, to compromise your integrity for comfort, to trade your fire for fame. And this is where many lose everything. Because the enemy doesn't just come to kill you, he comes to crown you too early. But if you've been forged in the secret place, you'll recognize the counterfeit. You'll feel the frequency is off, and you'll walk away, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. And when you pass that test, something irreversible happens. Your voice starts to carry divine vibration, not just influence, impact. People start responding to you without knowing why. Your words carry weight. Your silence carries presence. You begin to open your mouth and atmospheres shift. That's not charisma. That's consecration. You've become a living signal. Your energy becomes a key that unlocks others. And now you must learn how to govern this power with precision. You don't speak unless instructed. You don't manifest unless aligned. You don't pour unless the vessel is ready. Because now you understand, every time you release this power, realities bend. You're not playing with inspiration. You're operating the architecture of the unseen. Finally, you must train in spiritual sustainability. This is where most burn out, because they keep pouring without returning. They keep giving without grounding. They keep speaking without silence. And eventually they lose what made them powerful in the first place. Omega power is not about being on fire all the time. It's about managing your flame. You withdraw when needed. You replenish in stillness. You feast on the word. You surround yourself with people who protect your frequency, not just your ego. You live by rhythm, not reaction. You realize that your greatest weapon is not your voice, it's your vibration. And you protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. So now I ask you, with fire in my bones and tears in my spirit, are you building a life that can survive the very power you're praying for? Are you ready to be invisible in order to become immortal in impact? Have you built the interior throne strong enough to carry the weight of eternal energy? Because if you haven't, the power will crush you. But if you have, you're not just rising, you're ascending. the Omega Mantle becoming the final weapon heaven sends when everything else fails. There comes a moment in the life of every chosen one where the heavens go silent, the mentors vanish, the signs dry up, and even your own voice feels like an echo. It's not abandonment, it's activation. Because once you've been trained, tested, stripped, and forged, you are no longer a student of power. You become the vessel of it. This is where the Omega Mantle descends. Not as a feeling, not as an announcement, but as a weight. A divine gravity that rests on your spirit like something ancient has claimed you. This is not a gift you use. This is a life you carry. It is the moment heaven looks across the battlefield, sees that everything else has failed, and says, "Now send them." There comes a moment in the life of every chosen one where the heavens go silent, the mentors vanish, the signs dry up, and even your own voice feels like an echo. It's not abandonment, it's activation. Because once you've been trained, tested, stripped, and forged, you are no longer a student of power. You become the vessel of it. This is where the Omega Mantle descends, not as a feeling, not as an announcement, but as a weight. A divine gravity that rests on your spirit like something ancient has claimed you. This is not a gift you use. This is a life you carry. It is the moment heaven looks across the battlefield, sees that everything else has failed, and says, "Now send them." But this is not glory without cost. The Omega Mantle will isolate you, not because people don't love you, but because few can understand you. You'll speak truths that sound like madness. You'll act on instructions that make no sense to logic. You'll carry burdens that aren't yours, weep for people you've never met, and wake up with assignments that have no origin in time. This is what it means to become heaven's final weapon. You do not live for comfort. You live for consequence. Every step you take is war. Every breath you take is strategy. Every word you speak is legislation. You're not just living life, you're rewriting the script of history from the inside out. And yet, here's the paradox. Those who carry the Omega Mantle are the gentlest souls you'll ever meet. Not weak, not passive, but deeply tender. Because they've touched both the fire of God and the fragility of humanity. They've been to the edge of glory and the pit of despair. They've seen angels weep and demons laugh. And through it all, they've chosen love over bitterness, forgiveness over revenge, stillness over performance. That's why their presence is so potent. It's not charisma, it's compassion forged in flames. And that's why heaven trusts them with final missions. Because they won't use the power for themselves. They'll deliver it where it's needed and disappear. The Omega Mantle also gives you access to something few understand, the ability to speak to systems and structures, not just souls. This is when your words carry legislative authority. You don't just inspire people, you dismantle principalities. You speak and things behind the curtain begin to tremble. Entire bloodlines are shifted, curses break in silence, territories realign. This is why your warfare feels different. You're not just battling for yourself, you're a gatekeeper for generations. You've been given keys that unlock cities, not just hearts. And that's why your battles are heavier. That's why your process took longer. You weren't being prepared for a moment. You were being forged to govern realms. But here's the final secret. Those who carry the Omega mantle don't see themselves as powerful. They see themselves as empty. They walk with a limp. They carry a wound. They know they're nothing without the breath of God sustaining them moment by moment. That's the irony. The most dangerous people in the spirit are the most dependent. They don't boast. They burn. They don't broadcast. They bleed. And it's in that bleeding that the oil flows. Because heaven doesn't anoint perfection, it anoints yieldedness. And when your soul is completely yielded, you become a weapon that cannot be countered. Not because of your strength, but because of your oneness with the voice that spoke stars into being. So I ask you again, ruthlessly, gently, truthfully, have you been mistaking your isolation for rejection when it was actually selection? Have you been resenting your process when it was the very thing that made you dangerous to darkness? Have you been asking God for power when He was trying to give you presence? Because if you've made it this far, you're not just seeking truth. You are the truth the world has been waiting to see. You are the echo of a war cry spoken before time began. You are the final key, the last wave, the Omega signal wrapped in skin. And when you realize that, you won't have to fight to be seen. You'll be sent to where only the entrusted can go. And when you speak, eternity will answer back. Becoming the flame, life after the awakening of Omega power. Once the Omega flame is lit within you, it doesn't go out, it consumes. Not in the way the world fears, but in the way heaven designs. It doesn't burn you up, it burns you clear. You become transparent, no longer hiding behind identity, image, or insecurity. There's nothing left to prove, nothing left to perform. You are no longer trying to convince the world of your worth because your existence has already become a verdict. And from that place, your life begins to move with a rhythm that defies logic. You stop chasing destiny and start embodying it. You don't need to fight for alignment because you are alignment. The Omega flame turns you into a walking ordinance of heaven. But with this clarity comes a new kind of loneliness. Not the emptiness of isolation, but the weight of separation. You begin to discern the difference between connection and assignment. Some people are drawn to your light, but they don't carry your frequency. Others admire your power, but they can't handle your fire. And so you walk alone, not because you're better, but because you've been set apart. And in that solitude, you begin to realize Omega carriers are not called to belong. They're called to build. You're not waiting to be invited to the table, you are the table. You don't need a seat. You are the feast that awakens kings and resurrects warriors. There's also a shift in how you view pain. You stop resenting it. You stop running from it. You meet it. You understand that every wound was a chisel. Every betrayal was a refining. Every delay was a divine recalibration. Pain didn't disqualify you, it qualified you. It tuned your ears to the frequency of the broken. It gave you language for those who can't speak their own pain. And now when you move, you don't just speak to people, you speak as them. You are no longer a leader who leads from the top, you lead from within. Because you've been there, you've bled there, you've resurrected there. And that's what makes you dangerous. Not just your power, but your proximity to the pit. Your life becomes a paradox. You feel things more deeply, but you hold them more lightly. You carry immense weight, but you move with divine ease. You are constantly in warfare, but you radiate peace. You are deeply aware of evil, but you are never afraid. That's what Omega living feels like. You are no longer living for survival or success, you're living for significance. Every moment is sacred. Every word is intentional. Every step is warfare. And yet you laugh more. You rest more. You trust more. Because you know it's not your battle anymore. You've become the strategy. You are no longer the soldier. You are the signal that moves armies from the unseen. And yes, there will still be attacks. The enemy doesn't stop because you've awakened, he intensifies. But the difference now is that you no longer react from fear. You respond from position. You don't panic, you prophesy. You don't beg, you legislate. You don't retreat, you reveal. The darkness may roar, but you've learned that storms are just disguises for divine instruction. You don't curse the wind, you ask it what it came to teach you. And when the warfare hits hardest, you don't question your authority, you double down on your assignment. Because now you know pressure is just confirmation that you're carrying something the enemy can't stop. Eventually, your life becomes less about what you're doing and more about what you're becoming. You're not chasing impact, you are the impact. You don't need to shout to shift rooms. Your presence becomes your platform. People start encountering God not through your words, but through your walk. You become a mirror that reflects heaven even when you say nothing. And the most stunning part? You start meeting others like you, other Omega carriers. Other flames walking around in skin. And when you lock eyes with them, there's no need for small talk. You recognize the weight, the fire, the assignment. You don't compete, you converge. Because you know this isn't about building kingdoms. It's about restoring the divine blueprint. And so the final phase begins, not of action, but of transmission. You become a living scroll, a sacred signal that others read without words. You move through airports, boardrooms, churches, cities, and people start awakening just by being near you. They don't know why. They just feel seen. They feel safe. They feel shaken. And that's when you realize this was never about you. It was never about your platform, your brand, your name. It was always about becoming a living portal through which God could walk back into a world that forgot his voice. You are not just a flame. You are a fire starter. And the world has only just begun to feel the heat. So I'll leave you with this question, the final one, the deepest one. Now that the Omega flame has been lit in you, what will you ignite in others? Will you hide it in safety? Or will you burn with holy madness until the world remembers what heaven feels like? Asterisk, will you shrink to fit into systems? Or will you be the wild, uncontainable signal that makes thrones tremble and bones rise? Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs you, fully awakened, fully alive, fully Omega. Not tomorrow, not someday, now.